Chapter 11 of the Me Addiction is called Me and Family. We start to move you as a reader into thinking, where does God want me to go with this? What are the ramifications of the me addiction, not just in my own life, but in the people around me as I live in community? And so we look at this story of Cain and Abel and what happens between these two brothers, and how Cain was jealous of his brother who brought a sacrifice to God, an offering to God that for some reason caught God's eye. And Cain was jealous about that, and so the scripture says he rose up against his brother. It's a very violent scene if you can read it with your imagination. And so he puts his brother away, he murders him, and God comes to Cain and he says, "Where is your brother?" And his response is, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And one of the things we want to encourage you to do is understand that the answer to that question is a resounding yes. We are our brother's keeper. Keeper is an interesting word because it's the same word used for Adam's vocation. He was to keep the garden, take care of those things in the garden. And so Cain was to be his brother's keeper. He's supposed to do well by his brother. And the good news is you and I can do well in that area too. We can take care of the people around us, and we can do well as we relate to them. And we'll do much better without the me addiction holding us back. Let me encourage you to read that chapter and think of the people in your life and how being God addicted will be a positive influence in their life too.
Chapter 11 is titled Me and My Family. You probably heard the saying, "You always hurt those you love." And really, maybe that's the concept around this chapter, is that those who are closest to you are often those who are hurt the most by the choices that you make. So whether we realize it or not, our selfish choices can often affect our family members, our spouses, our children, and our colleagues and our friends around us. And that because we live in relationship with other people, our choices do have consequences, and we can either hurt or help other people around us.
Not only does God clothe us, but He sets a course of life for us. In chapter 11, the chapter is entitled "Me and Family." We really get into kind of the aftermath of Adam and Eve's sin, and we get into the first murder, Cain and Abel. And I love the analogy. I don't really love it, but it seems so true, where God is warning Cain that sin is crouching and it wants to have you. Cain was jealous of his brother Abel, and sin is seen as this, again, as this outside entity that wants to possess us. It doesn't want to cause us to do something wrong. It wants to own us, and it wants to re-govern our life trajectory. All relationships can be impacted by sin in a very destructive way because sin begins to own us and control the way we respond to others.
And in that story, another interesting thing is Cain had the possibility of doing well.
Yes.
You know, he didn't have to give in to it.
That's right.
And sometimes I think we read the story and think, well, he was a goner
Right.
from the start. But there's that phrase about he had the opportunity to do well and he didn't do well.
Yes.
You know, and then God comes in and he asks him about his brother, and he says, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Do you know anything interesting about that word keeper, Glenn?
I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to do that or not. But it's an interesting word because it's the same word when Adam was given his job description to keep the garden.
Right.
And so this was another kind of keeping that was to be done. And I don't know if he understood that. I don't know if we understand that part of the keeping vocation that God has given us is to take care of each other. Are we
Right.
our brother's keeper? The answer is
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
we are.
We're supposed to be.
Well, and I think that the crux of this chapter for me is sin is looking for a vulnerable place in our life. So whatever the sin is, whatever the me addiction, how it's expressed in your life, sin looks for the vulnerable place, and it always brings destruction to other relationships. That's what sin's going to do.